everyone, so we're talking about printmaking in this video. So there are four major types of printmaking. So there's relief printing, intaglio printing, planographic printing, and screen printing. So is um, relief printing is when the image is carved into a surface like wood or linoleum. The raised areas are inked and pressed into paper. So examples are woodcut, lino cut, calligraphic. So the main thing is the areas you want to print are raised above the surface. So here are some examples. So this is a lino cut right here. So you can see how it was carved down into this to create a stamp. Here's another example. So when they're printed, they are printed in reverse. So see how it flipped over from how the original picture is. You can use it to create patterns or textures. So see how I use this so I could repeat the print so that it fills up the whole page. And then there's also calligraphic printing, which is when you use different materials with textures to create different imagery using those textures. So like here there was bubble wrap. Here there was like a foam piece. So you take, this one has already been used, which is why it has the ink all over it, but it has these raised textures that can create an image like this. So the raised surface is printed. And then the next is intaglio printing. So this technique, the image is etched into the surface, usually on metal or plexiglass. Image is applied, or ink is applied, filling the incisions incised areas, and excess ink is wiped off. The plate then pressed into the paper. So like etching, engraving, aquatint, and the key characteristic is the image is carved into the plate and the ink sits in the grooves. So an example with like plexiglass, you can kind of see the image, it's etched in, and then the ink goes in those areas. I guess this is the etched side, but the other one is how it would look. So you can etch in those textures. Here's an example of one that I did in high school, a hand holding a candle, and this was done with plexiglass. You can also color it in on top of it. This was one done on metal. And then the next process is planographic printing. So the image is created on a flat surface, such as a stone, metal plate, or jelly plate. So lithography or monoprinting. So this one, the key characteristic is the surface is flat and the ink is applied. So here's one done on tin foil, added with the wax pencil, and then print. So all the prints are reversed. Here's another lithographic print. This one was used with a Sharpie marker on like a plastic surface. And then this one is a mono print that I did in high school. This is my first ever mono print. All right, and then the last process is screen printing. So this technique, the ink is pushed through a mesh screen or stencil onto paper, fabric, or another surface. The non-image areas are blocked off, and the ink passes through only the open areas. So The example of this is silkscreen printing, and the key characteristics: the ink is forced through a mesh screen with a stencil. So this is a screen printing screen. This is the mesh, and then the paper goes down here. See how it's see-through. So we add filler. Or here's an example of some of these prints weren't the best. And you can see how this one they didn't get lined up accurately. Like this has two different parts to it. Here's one that I went back in and added stems to it as well. This one is screen printing too. So for all of mine, all of them had at least 2 layers. Each color is a different layer with printing. And then there are some different materials that I want to show. Alright, so the first tool I want to show you is a lino cutter with gouge tips. So this is a lino cutter to carve linoleum, and the gouge tips can be found inside. Let's just take one out. This one's a pretty thin one. I want to be really careful with them because that sharp part was going into my hand and I really shouldn't hold it like that. So I'm going to twist the top. I'm going to take this rounded side and put it, I might need to twist it a little bit more. Tighten this in place, and so then that way I can carve. So to carve the linoleum, you want to have a bench hook, so that way it doesn't end up cutting the table, it doesn't end up cutting your hand, it just goes into the wood. Like if I had this piece right here and I was carving into it, see, it could carve, if it slips, it just goes to the wood. The next thing I would like to point out is an engraving tool like this. They're really sharp, so you want to be careful with them, but this is for etching in metal or plexiglass. This right here is an ink plate, and this right here is a brayer. This is so you can roll the ink onto your plate. And then a baron. You can also use a wooden spoon. This is so when you put your paper on top of your plate, you can make sure that you get all of your ink pressed on there, or you can also use a printing press. Okay, so this is our printing press. You turn this wheel here to be able to move the plate from one side to the other, so it presses the plate with the paper so that the ink is transferred. You might have to move these right here to raise or lower this to add more pressure to the plate. You don't want too much where it's going to break or too hard to move it through, but you don't want it to be super easy to move it through because then it's not going to press the plate at all. There are these blankets or this cardboard here that we put the plate inside, and that holds everything together as it goes through the printing press.